Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 594 for July 15th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this week's show. I look forward to getting into it this week off the heels of concluding our Best Picture movie series. We concluded the 1940s. We will pick that series up at a later date. Brendan and I will determine that, and we'll decide on a new decade and hopefully get to that in a couple of months' time.
Yep.
But for now, we're going to take a little break from that. And this week we have catch up. We have 2024 homework that we've done. We're going to talk about some movies that we've watched that we haven't really discussed here on the show. We haven't done a review of. So we'll talk about some of those movies. Before we get to that later on, though, I want to talk about Midnight Special. Let's talk about it.
Again?
Jeff Nichols. Yep, we have to bring it up. And the reason I bring it up is because...
becoming the Midnight Special podcast. We got to rename it now.
I know we should. Look, I am wearing my Midnight Special shirt. For those on YouTube, you can kind of see it a little bit.
There are so many podcasts out there that tailor their entire podcast off of, let's say, one film or one thing. Yeah. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for us to do something like that.
Yeah, we can create a spinoff show. We have a few of them already. We'll just do that. Look, the reason I wanted to bring up Midnight Special is because I watched it for the first time this last week. And for the first time in years. It's been quite a few years.
Oh my gosh,
however,
are you okay?
I was asked to be on another show.
Okay.
It was our great friend, Ben Miller, asked me to be on his show.
Yeah. And
the great thing about his podcast, the Target Audience Podcast, is that it's all about you being the main demo, the main target for a specific film.
It's your
film. So he
film,
reached out to me. Yeah, he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I want you to be on the show." I said, "I would love to be on the show." And he goes, "Midnight Special. Let's talk about it." To which I replied with tears, of course, "I am so there."
It's like
so.
He didn't even have to ask you what film you would be the target audience for. He just knew right away.
Like, Midnight Special, let's do it. And I said yes.
People hear your name. People hear your name. They automatically just associate you as the Midnight Special guy. I mean, I feel like that's become
and
part
I
of your
love
DNA.
that. Like if there needs to be a champion for that film, and I am more than happy to take up the mantle because it is a masterpiece. It is one of the best films of the 2010s.
Do I have one of those? Whether it be a modern film or any film in general, where you look at me and think, Brennan, you are that.
Oh man, there's probably a few. The one that comes to mind immediately is the Linklater film, Everybody Wants Some.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
That's one that comes to mind.
If we're going to keep it within the realm of, let's say, more modern films that really spoke to us, that maybe didn't speak to other people in the same way, I think Everybody Wants Some is certainly a contender there for me.
For sure. Like, I feel like you champion that film more so than most, although I do think people
it has its fans,
really come around on that.
Yeah, it has its fans, and I think it's
especially
even garnering...
at the time, you championed it heavier than most.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that might be it. If we're going to keep it in the realm of more, let's say the 2010 specifically, that might be my film.
For sure. At any rate, I'm grateful to Ben. He asked me to be on that show. Yeah. So in preparation, I, of course, brought out my Blu-ray, put it in the PlayStation, and I hit go on that film. And Brendan, I can't even begin to articulate, like, even just taking the DVD or the Blu-ray, excuse me, out of the case, I was starting to prep myself emotionally. I could feel my body go into some sort of protective shield.
Are you
Here
hydrated?
we go.
Are you
This
okay?
is going to be an experience. And I click start on the Blu-ray, and within 30 seconds, I had completely lost it. I was undone.
Did you watch this by
30 seconds
yourself?
into that film, like, and it starts off with them at the hotel, and you have Roy and Lucas there watching the news. You immediately get a sense of what's at play. Alton there reading his comics, and they take off from the hotel. They're driving down the road in the car. It's an incredible beginning to that film.
Yeah.
And the title card comes on. That great score, that great midnight special cue kicks in as they're driving down the road there, and
David
the
Wingo,
pitch
baby.
black. I was undone by the beginning. So I texted Brendan, and I'm like, I'm 2
I know-
minutes
yeah, I
into
know.
this film, and I'm sobbing already.
And that's why I seriously ask, are you hydrated or do you need water?
Like, it was kind of sad. Like, I could not help myself. Like, 2 minutes in, I was undone. And then my lovely wife, who has not really seen the film before, sat on the couch and was pseudo watching, folding laundry, that kind of thing. But she was there. And it got to a point where I was struggling to contain myself. And even though I've been with my wife for 10 years,
Yeah.
and she's seen me emotional on many occasions, I still couldn't help but feel a little, I don't know if embarrassment is the right word, but I went and grabbed a hoodie, and I just put the hoodie up and just kind of isolated myself because
my-
it was kind of sad.
My
Like, it was-
gosh. That's why I asked if you watched it alone or with somebody, and I was curious
yeah,
to see
and
if
she was
anyone
there,
with you.
and
Has Sam
Yeah,
seen
no.
it? I assume he hasn't seen
no,
this one yet.
Sam hasn't seen it. He's still, I think, a little too young to really understand it. But
Yeah, because I know it's a PG-13 film, and I think he's at a certain age that things that happen in it might not scar him necessarily. It's just more so
No.
the subject matter. It's
Yeah.
just he probably can't relate to the methodical.
yeah,
edge.
exactly. He would get bored pretty easily with it. for
Yeah,
sure.
that makes sense.
Whereas I was not bored, and I found myself extremely moved by it. And I don't, obviously we're not here to re-review that film, but I do want to say
course we
this
are.
though. There are things in it this time around that affected me more, or that I just didn't realize before, especially with the Lucas character played by Joel Edgerton, who's fantastic in the film. But I've always seen that film as a Roy and Alton movie, and Sarah to some degree as well.
Sure.
But there's a moment in this film, in Midnight Special, where Lucas is talking about the first time he meets Alton, and he recoils in his own emotion. And I've never noticed that before. Like, he chokes up talking about Alton and realizing that this is something special, that what we're doing does have a cost to it. Like, there are these
Yeah.
ramifications. Like, there is something transcendent about what we're trying to do, and him realizing the profundity of it, and to see him get choked up is something that I had never really registered with me before. So like, I already undone became further undone. And I feel like the same thing with Sarah too. Like, that moment when Alton finally disappears at the end, and you see Kirsten Dunst just completely drop in this motherly agony. Just kill her. Just
You make
absolutely
a
kill
great
her.
you make a great point around Joel Edgerton, because he's just the kind of actor that can fill in the empty spaces of a character arc that's not on the page and make you infer certain things about their past that could be there. And I think that's the case with Lucas, his name is, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the case with him, that he delivers a performance where you think, has he experienced something like this in his own life that now he can find some relatability to what Roy is going through?
Yeah.
And it's never answered for you, but the
No.
performance suggests that there is a tightness there, that there is a connectivity there. And
Or
that's
at the
sign of a
very
great movie.
least, he believes in something that he never did previously.
Sure.
You get the, you get the feeling that Lucas isn't much of a spiritual person.
Yeah.
He didn't grow up on the ranch. He doesn't seem to have that kind of ethos to it. So he probably doesn't. He's never really believed in anything profound like that.
Right.
Let alone this young child that belongs to his best friend.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
when he sees the truth of it, it hits him in a way that nothing else ever had before. And the great thing about Jeff Nichols is that the film doesn't give you any of that. Like none of that.
He makes movies for adults.
Yeah. And I love that you're allowed to fill in those gaps. And I think the storytelling and Edgerton's performance does such a great job of doing that. So
yeah, that great interview you had with Jeff Nichols promoting the bike riders, I could just tell you had so much you wanted to say about Midnight Special.
Man, I could have
your wings were so clipped because you realized we're not here to talk about this film. I'm here to help promote a new movie, and I don't want to be that guy that doesn't do that.
I could have talked to him exclusively about it for an hour. I would have loved to do that. I don't know when it has its 10-year anniversary in a couple of years, maybe.
Oh yeah.
I'll
See
get
if
a
there's a
chance
reason
to
to,
talk to
I mean,
him.
there's always a reason to celebrate it, but see if there's ever if there's any push, if there's any like marketing push for it, get yourself
reach
front of
out.
the line.
Yeah,
get
I'll
yourself
see
front of
if-
the line.
See if there's something that we can do, because I would love to
That's coming up soon.
talk
That's
to
only
him
in 2
about
years.
that film. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, it's coming up. I would love to be on the front lines for that. I think it would be.
I knew
great.
it was
But-
coming up. I just now realize the weight of how long it has been since that movie has come out. Like I feel
Crazy.
old now.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about 10 years old. The first time I saw that film, I was a brand new father. Sam was 6 months old at the time, I want to say.
Jeez.
And he's the same age as that film, more or less, right? So he's going to
He's 8.5 going on 9
this year.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's how math works.
It's wild. Yep. At any rate, it was great to see Midnight Special. If you haven't seen it, I urge everyone to go and check it out. It is.
And thanks for tuning into the Midnight Special podcast once again.
Before we get to our catch up, a couple of things here real fast. We got some trailers to talk about, Brendan.
Oh,
Gladiator the Second. The sequel.
Gladiator Roman numeral
Dose.
2.
Exactly. What did you think about? We talked about the posters and some of the lead up a few weeks ago, but what did you think about the actual footage we got now of Gladiator 2?
It looks fun. It looks fun.
Yeah.
I love that Denzel is here not doing any type of authentic Roman accent whatsoever. It's in keeping to what Ben Affleck did in The Last Duel, and I honestly respect that it's not going for authenticity. There's so much you can criticize about that first Gladiator for being historically inaccurate, even though it does get some details right, which I'll give it credit for.
Sure.
But it doesn't care about those things. The movie is Roman Rocky. That movie was Roman Rocky. It's a very good version of Roman Rocky, and it's very entertaining. And this looks to be in keeping with that. I wasn't so sure about that needle drop, No Church in the Wild. I'm so hit or miss on needle drops like that, especially when they're lyrically so obvious when compared to what is actually happening in the movie. So that might be the thing there for me. The thing I do worry about with regard to this trailer, as fun as it looks, and I love the bigness of it, it's in that classic vein of Ridley Scott making movies in a way that we don't see anymore. I wonder if we got too much, because it does seem to suggest that we are at least getting a tease of what the final battle is going to be. And that is something I didn't necessarily want to see this early. And maybe that's a misdirect. Maybe there's more going on here than we know. This might be something deconstructionistic when compared to that first Gladiator. I don't know. But I do wonder if maybe we saw a little bit too much, because I feel like the narrative framework is going to be pretty similar. But at the same time, Ridley Scott just makes these big movies that feel like they come from a different era. And I love that he's doing that still. I can't believe that he made Napoleon, and only a year later we're getting something this looks like it would have taken 7 years to make. I have to give him respect for just his ability to do that so quickly. Maybe it means the movie itself might not be very good, but at least it's going to look good. that's at least a step in the right direction as far as modern movie making is concerned. So I can at least acknowledge that. But it looks fun.
Yeah.
I think it looks fun.
I think it looks like a lot of fun as well. It's Ridley being Ridley. That's what you got to love. And that means that historical accuracies will be hit or miss, including accent work. That's one of the best parts of The Last Duel is whatever Ben Affleck was doing.
I mean, that movie basically took place in Boston.
Exactly. And so is Denzel. Whatever his character's background is, he's from Boston. He just found himself in Rome during these events, but he's clearly from Boston, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. That's what makes Ridley Scott's films a lot of fun. And say what you will about Napoleon and what he's been doing recently. I still think he's absolutely bringing it. And I love The Last Duel. I thought it was absolutely great. I look forward to this director's cut of Napoleon that we are getting. Apple has unveiled that it is coming. It's happening for real.
I think there's going to be a great movie in there. I really do.
So as well.
I say this as someone that really liked The Last Duel when I saw it, but I had some reservations. But the more I think about it, this might be a bit of a questionable statement. I think it might be Ridley Scott's best historical epic. I think it might be his best one. The more I think about it, the more I think that is a hidden masterpiece that we didn't talk about enough.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I very much do agree. And I'm with you in terms like the scale of Gladiator 2, the epic quality of it. It looks really great. It's refreshing to see a giant movie like this that's obviously going to involve a lot of digital effects not look like it was shot in Atlanta.
CGI soup, as you call it.
Yeah, like a parking lot.
Yeah,
or
a giant blue and green
CGI
box.
soup. Yeah. Exactly. Like it's not a giant green and blue box. And if you're going to do that, at least do what James Cameron does. Like his movies are shot in a blue box, but they look fantastic. Yeah. I don't know what's happening at Disney, but everything Marvel and Star Wars over the last 5 years has increasingly gotten more dull.
Which is so unfortunate. On that subject, and sorry to cut you off, with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out pretty soon, I'm rewatching Loki season 2 a little bit, thinking that there might be some tie-ins there, and I want to be fresh on that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how Marvel overall is really lacking in the visual department. And we certainly don't need to talk about why. We certainly know some of the stories why, but that's a different conversation. But Loki looks great. That
Loki
show
looks
so much more cinematic than any of their movies as of late.
It is the exception. I very much do agree with you. I do really like both seasons 1 and 2 of Loki. There are exceptions. There's no doubt about it. Same with Star Wars. There's been a few exceptions as well. But generally, they're as much to blame as anybody for the CGI soup over the last 10, 15 years.
For sure. I agree.
Gladiator 2, I am not surprised at all to see that Ridley is continuing to be the artist that we know and love.
Yeah.
Of course, this was going to have an epic scale that looks fantastic. And it does look sensational. The idea of them filling up the arena with water to create these Navy battles, I have no idea about the historical accuracy of that, but hell yes. Like I'm all for that.
I heard there might be some truth to that, or at least maybe the attempt at that was truthful. Maybe the success is questionable.
I don't know. It looks fantastic.
Honestly, I don't care. It looks like fun.
It looks great. And the other thing too about the trailer is that it seems to suggest, now I don't know if this is going to be something that plays out as the narrative goes. Perhaps it's flashback is what we're seeing here, but it seems as if the scale and the conflict moves outside the arena. And I do wonder if what takes place here begins to demonstrate or get to the beginning of the downfall of the Roman Empire. And if that is the case,
That would be interesting.
I mean, you talk about prescient timing.
Uh-huh.
It could be impeccable for the political landscape that we find ourselves in right now in the United States. Like,
Well, it'd be very on the nose, but
hilarious.
yeah, it'd be very on the nose if that's the case. But for a movie like this, that's probably not going for any type of artful subtlety. I'm here for it. Like, that's fine then.
Well, and I think that's more of a coincidence. I don't think that's
Maybe.
at all on Ridley's mind when making this, but the parallels would be hilarious.
Well,
though.
weirdly, I think many of Ridley's best films have aged gracefully over the years, sometimes by accident. I think sometimes they haven't really been his intent. And I feel like that might, if that ends up happening here, that might be another example of that.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
we'll see. I don't know. It looks fun.
good.
It looks like a lot of fun.
Looks really good. Yeah, I cannot wait. On another note, let's talk about another trailer real quick. Speaking of Marvel, what did you think about the Captain America trailer?
I think it's less so the story.
Okay.
It's less so the content itself, less so the movie that we're getting, less so who's involved, less so whatever the story is. I think Marvel trailers are a big reason why I have a hard time being pleased by trailers in general anymore, because I feel like they're all just edited the same. I feel like they follow a similar blueprint every single time. It has a similar flow. It ends with a very particular kind of tease that's meant to get you very excited. And unlike Gladiator 2 or the trailer for Gladiator 2, that trailer feels like its own form of like artful marketing. Like it's its own thing. It has its own agenda on its mind, has its own goal. Captain America Brave New World, the trailer looks like a Marvel trailer. And I'm kind of sick of seeing the same blueprint over and over again. I love the cast. I think there's a potentially interesting story here, but I wasn't wowed by anything I saw, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn in the sense that I think it could be good. I'm interested enough in Sam and him clearly still at conflict with these dueling identities. He's now Captain America, which when confronted by Thaddeus Ross, there's a gag there in the trailer that he isn't Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
And so, which he's like, no, I'm not. And the next shot is of him with the shield, but also his falcon wings. So it seems, again, if I'm taking that at face value, the film is going to wrestle with those dueling identities and who he is as Captain America and how he wants to be defined with the shield and how he's going to separate himself from Steve Rogers. I think that's interesting enough. If you know anything about Red Hulk, which the trailer gives away, like I kind of love that they're not even hiding it. We've talked about this in the past. It seemed as if that film was gonna include a Red Hulk storyline. I'm glad that we're going there, and that I am also interested in. I like that in the comics. I'm a fan of the Red Hulk story in the comics, so to see that in this film could be really interesting as well. But then there's the whole Marvel of it all. Like I know it's not going to look great. You know that it's going to get bogged down in kind of the larger MCU of it all in some way, shape, or form. But at the same time, it does seem like we're scaling back from the largeness of where things have been, in terms of Endgame and and just how vast the MCU has gotten. It does seem as if we're kind of scaling back a little bit. You know, it's everything's taking place on Earth seemingly. So like I kind of like that about it. I just don't know about the MCU of it all. Like if best case, what I'm really hoping for based off of this, Brendan, is that we're getting back to, you know, maybe not phase 1, but like that phase 2 era of the MCU, like the Winter Soldier kind of vibe. Even if we're not there aesthetically, we've moved beyond that.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping story-wise, character-wise, maybe emotion-wise, we're able to get back to that level of where the MCU was. And this seems to suggest it might be heading in that direction.
I'm not sure yet. Obviously, we'll have to see the final film to know for sure whether it is a genuine film with something to say or if it's just a mandated product because it was announced some time ago and they have to fulfill that promise. We'll see. I'm with you that I want to get that same sensation of phase 1 and phase 2 again. And not that they need to feel like events per se. I just want good content. I just want content that was exciting. And this is where I think Marvel right now, especially given the recent news as we're recording this, that Michael Waldron is no longer writing Avengers 5, I think we found out, or at least reportedly not writing it. There's so many things going on behind the scenes that suggest something seems off. And we've known that something seems off. And I keep thinking that Marvel needs some type of reset. And maybe they do have some type of planned reset. I think calling this phase 4 and even phase 5 may have been a bit of a mistake. Like it almost needs to feel like a new phase 1 of sorts after the finality of Endgame. And I'm kind of wondering, and I don't want to make anticipations or even expectations for myself. I'm wondering if Deadpool and Wolverine is going to serve as that reset button. I feel like it has the potential to do that. And if it does,
that might be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that is something Marvel needs. I think they need something to come out here and retool our expectations while simultaneously retooling the trajectory of the MCU and kind of start from scratch again because of all these flip-flopping things we keep hearing behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. You couple that with the Jonathan Majors news, obviously they're going to have to reshift the whole King narrative.
All the Blade news, like Blade's had like 5 directors at this point?
Yeah, I don't think that'll ever see the light of day.
I don't think so either.
What are they going to do with the King character, the whole multiverse saga? It's just been a volatile process to this point for sure.
Yeah.
So a reset with Deadpool and Wolverine, I could absolutely see that being the case, which is perhaps why Captain America Brave New World feeling more like a phase 2 movie than a phase 5 film. Maybe that makes sense. Like let's kind of reshift a little bit. Let's refocus and
make it almost feel like another origin story for him in some ways.
Which is why I like the whole conflict of him kind of battling this dueling identities, because that kind of feels like a Tony Stark and Iron Man 3, who am I now kind of thing.
Sure.
And I do love that. Like that I think is great. And then you introduce Red Hulk, that still keeps things grounded to Earth. We don't have to go outside into the cosmos or anything to that sort. And I love the potential of this film in that regard.
Yeah.
Regardless of how dull it will be visually, we know there's going to be a blandness to it. But moving that aside, story-wise, character-wise, I think there's potential for it to reset the MCU in a way that could be effective. That's my hope anyway. And based off of the footage, I think there's a reason to keep hope. I want to like Julius Onah as a filmmaker. I was a little mixed on Loose.
I like the intent. I like the performances in it. I think there's some decent filmmaking there. I don't really count the Cloverfield paradox because I feel like he was really just there as a director for hire for some other. That's not his film.
No, at least with Loose, there was an ambition to it that you could recognize.
Sure.
And I I was mixed on it, but I liked it more than I didn't.
Sure.
And yeah, and I think with Brave New World, it seems as if it might be in good hands. At least I'm hoping that is the case as far as MCU standards go. I should say.
Me too. I just want to get excited about these again.
I agree. I agree. Anyway, we shall see on all of that.
We shall see.
Let's talk about the box office, Brendan.
The Parade.
You know what film? The Parade, I would say is on.
It's in a very particular way, very exciting way that we probably didn't expect.
Absolutely, the marketing for Longlegs has been incredible. It's been clever. It's been really fun. They've had a great time amping up the scary factor of it, the tension, the dread of that movie, and it worked. It worked. It got people into the seats. It ended up coming in second place just behind Despicable Me 4. As you would expect, that film in its second weekend was going to still do pretty well. But this was Neon's biggest opening weekend by far, right?
It's its highest gross ever, if I'm being honest.
Yes.
At least I think so. And I have some of these results ahead of me, and I have to give credit to Dan Murrell on YouTube and his own podcast. He does this segment called Charts with Dan, where he goes through the box office every single Monday and goes through the economics of it all and how it all looks. And I think it's a really fascinating video for those who are listening and haven't seen it yet. But apparently Longlegs is now Neon's highest grossing movie as far as all weeks are considered. So this means that it's even higher than when Parasite was in its 19th week, and it was around the time of Oscar season. That only pulled like 5.7 million.
That's crazy. Wow.
So it's beating all of those in their respective weeks to the point that Longlegs was number 4 in the worldwide box office this weekend.
Yeah,
I think at 20, almost 26 million at this point. That is incredible. That is a huge feat for success, especially when you consider the budget for Longlegs. I think the movie was budgeted just under 10 million, and then there was also maybe a little bit around 10 million for marketing. Technically, it's already beaten that. It still has a way to go to actually break even, but that is a heck of a start for Neon right there.
Absolutely. 22.4 worldwide in the opening weekend.
Okay.
In the first few days. That's crazy. That's very, very, very good. You know, imagine that. You put in a little bit of marketing. It's a horror film. It's going to get some butts in the seats. So
I actually have to stand corrected. It's not Neon's highest grossing movie yet, but it is number 3. It's their 3rd highest grossing movie of all time, and it's only been out for one weekend. Yeah. So it has the highest weekend stretch of any Neon movie. But Parasite and I, Tonya are still their 2 highest grossing movies as far as their total theatrical runs are concerned. But the fact that Longlegs is closing in on those 2 in only a few days, that's pretty awesome.
And it hasn't had much of an international release yet. It's mostly been a domestic release to this point. So
the fact it was number 4 in the worldwide box office, most of those numbers were driven by its domestic success. I think it only added maybe like $3 million to that domestic total you laid out there.
Yeah, that film is going to do well for Neon. Yeah, like it just speaks to having a vision and being a little creative, having fun on social media, creating some viral buzz, and it did that. It did that extremely effectively, and I also love the poster they released on Sunday when we talked about how it was the number 1 movie in the world after Despicable Me 4.
Well,
and good.
This is where the marketing people over at Neon, who are helping to push this movie in the way that they are, they all deserve pats on the back because they really helped make this happen. And if the movie does well in its second weekend, I think a lot of it will be driven by that marketing campaign you're talking about right there. That poster they put out there about how it's the number 1 movie in America, ... behind Despicable Me 4.
So good.
That's great. That's great because we talked about this in our review of the film. I do wonder if the film itself will be the thing that allows it to succeed in multiple weekends. I think there might be a bit of a disconnect there. I'm really curious to see how it does in a week from now as we're recording this. I think that's where the story will be even more interesting. But if it does well a second time, yeah, maybe people are latching onto the movie itself, or the creative marketing campaign is still working overtime.
And I'm going to be real curious what they do with the other 3 films they have coming out this year after the success of Longlegs. I don't know if any of them has the kind of commercial appeal that maybe, something like Longlegs does. But on the docket is Anora. They have Anora, the Palme d'Or winner that might have Oscar chances. How are they going to market that movie? I don't know. Like, they've been so clever lately. I'm so curious.
I am too. Yeah, because that trailer for Anora, which has me excited for the film, it's basically just a trailer. It's not really doing anything to play into that marketing creativity that we're seeing with Longlegs. But maybe they devise something. Maybe they'll find something interesting to do with it. There's still a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be real curious to see what they do going forward. But yeah, it was very exciting to, at the very least, regardless of how we feel about Longlegs, to see it have that commercial viability for a small film like Longlegs that is distributed by Neon. These films typically don't do all that well. And it's exciting. It feels a little Barbenheimer to me in the sense that we're talking about something that's not IP. It's not a sequel. It's not a reboot. There's a lot about Longlegs that is familiar for sure. And that might be part of the commercial appeal of it. But it is this original movie that that is getting people excited. And I do love that. It reminds me of that discourse we had about Oppenheimer and other films
not necessarily grassroots marketing, but the marketing itself being the thing that gets people. It's almost like they want to partake in some type of event.
Exactly. It's a little bit of that Dune 2 thing. I mean, Dune 2 was always going to do great, but a lot of the buzz that ended up coming out was the organic grassroots popcorn bucket, people driving worms in the theater, like that sort of a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's very exciting. So yeah, the parade very much on, which is very exciting. After May, it was so doom and gloom. Everything looked bleak, but we're coming around. People are going to the theaters.
Inside Out 2 still doing great. We haven't mentioned that yet. That is, I think at this point right now, it's the 3rd highest grossing animated movie of all time worldwide. Gotta
love it.
I think it's at like almost 1.4 million. We were talking a few weeks ago that we have to keep in mind 1.5 million is probably going to happen. I think at this point, it only has Frozen 2 and the Super Mario Brothers movie to beat for the worldwide box office as far as animated films. I think it has a good chance of making it. At this point, I think it does.
I think so as well. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. Very, very excited for that. All right, let's move on and let's talk about quickly. I want to get your thoughts on Horizon Dose Part 2, the American Saga. It was supposed to continue next month, but it is being pulled. We're no longer going to get the saga. And,
I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means yet. Well, I guess we're still not sure if we're ever going to get it in theaters yet. At this point now, we know it's been delayed, but I don't know if we know if it's officially been canceled from theatrical release. I think the whole goal here is for people to discover Horizon Chapter 1 first.
Yeah,
and
that's what they're hoping for, yes.
Yeah, I do think this is still very unfortunate for mostly 2 reasons. One, you hate to see this happen to any movie, Chapter 2 specifically, just being pulled like this because of the lack of success for its predecessor. And selfishly speaking, I was looking forward to Chapter 2. I don't think you've seen Chapter 1 yet, but I actually think it's a very good movie.
Part of the problem, yeah.
You'll see it eventually. You're fine. But I also think of it this way. To have Chapter 1 come out when it did, and to have Chapter 2 come out only 2 months later might not have been the smartest choice. So I think there's an argument to be said for that.
Yeah. I always thought that was weird. I never understood that to begin with because I never saw Horizon as this thing that was going to make $1 bajillion.
It was always a hard sell.
To believe that those kind of epics could still make a lot of money, but I do think that was a little myopic on Costner and his team, or whoever's decision it was to put those two movies out back to back. That never made too much sense to me, especially if the idea was to have this be a 4-part saga. You need to give these films room to breathe. And if the film was never going to make that much in theaters, which shocking, it did not, then yes, go ahead, do what everyone else is doing, put it out on VOD and let it gain some momentum there.
I think the reason why Chapter 2 was originally slated to come out so quickly after Chapter 1 is simply because of how Chapter 1 ends, which I won't give away from a plot standpoint, but it more or less just ends. Like it basically just feels like half of a completed story. It's not like something like Kill Bill Volume 1, which even though it's half a movie, it feels like it still comes to some type of natural endpoint, right?
There's a conclusion that makes sense.
Even something like Dune Part 1, which I would say, I think that one might not be as conclusive as, let's say, Deathly Hallows Part 1 or Kill Bill Volume 1. But even so, it feels like it comes to a point where it's like, okay, like the end credits are rolling and it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's not the case for Horizon Chapter 1. It's like you're just experiencing something for 3 hours and then it's like, oh, we're done. You can leave now. So I kind of, from an artistic standpoint, I kind of get why having them released so close to each other would make sense. But to your point earlier and to what we're talking about here, maybe not the most viable when it comes to financial gain, and that was certainly evidence here.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about two movies that cost what, $50 million each, I think is the reporting there. So
I'm hearing two reports on that. I'm hearing $50 million each, but I'm also hearing $100 million just for Chapter 1.
That's wild.
I know.
I can't fathom that it was $100 million for one movie, but maybe.
Keep in mind, it's 3 hours. It's grand. It's epic.
Yes.
A lot happens. A lot of people. A lot of characters. A lot of things.
That's true.
A lot of horses.
A lot of horses. You got to feed the horses. That's where the money goes.
A lot of sets. So,
I mean, maybe. I mean, that could be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Either way. Yeah, I just don't think putting them back to back like that was a smart idea. I mean,
yeah.
And to your point, I mean, Dune 1, Dune 2, say what you will about how that ends. Maybe you feel like it's a little more random. I thought it was a nice point to end Dune Part 1. It felt conclusive enough to me to stop it there.
That's fair.
But even if you want to bring up the same argument, there was still, what, a year and a half in between films?
But also, Dune
couple years? Actually, more like it was a couple years?
Yeah. But Dune is going after a very different audience with different, I guess, viewing habits than, let's
Perhaps,
say.
But in terms of business, you have to think about it in
Sure.
the same way. I mean, you're like, even if an American Saga did well and you got people into the theater to see that, would it have been enough for people to go back a month later to be like, all right, I'm ready for 3 more hours of this?
That's why I bring up the audience, because Kevin Costner's audience is really more, the DVD age, the VHS age. That's who his audience is, given those who latched on to his success as a filmmaker back when Dances with Wolves won Best Picture, right?
Okay.
Are they going to be the people that go to the theater that often for 2-3 hour epics that close together? And I don't know if they are. They are more the video crowd these days. These are the ones where this long-term investment are going to make it a long-term investment. That's the audience here. So it almost makes me question the entire release strategy just in general, going to theaters.
Well, I was just going to say, then what's the point of even going? Yeah, what's the point of even going to theaters? Because to be successfully viable, you have to move beyond that demographic. You have to have more commercial appeal to that if you're going to make money. That's just not going to be enough.
Yep. And I do wonder if Costner maybe just had too much faith in his audience for these movies and maybe didn't really recognize where their position is as far as consumers of this kind of art.
I do think that is a little myopic, for sure. There's no way that alone would have been enough to get people into the theater, or enough people for it to be financially successful.
And it's a shame because it's a good movie. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts on Chapter 1 when you get the chance.
I look forward to it. I like COVID is the blame there for me. I got
Is that what it officially was?
Time. Well, I not officially, but I'm fairly certain
self-diagnosed COVID.
Fairly certain that's what it is, because there's been others around me that have been officially diagnosed.
Oh, okay.
I think you can connect the dots. And it felt like
fair.
COVID.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
It was just like getting it the first time.
Yeah, there you go.
Still kicked your butt. At any rate, either way, I got sick and could not get to the theater to see Horizon. But I do want to see it. I will catch it as soon as it's available to rent on demand. Same thing with A Quiet Place. I look forward to catching up with both of those movies. But
yeah, very interested to hearing your thoughts on both of those.
Yeah,
I honestly, I feel like we sometimes have the same brain, to the point that I can normally tell which movies you'll respond to and which ones you won't. These two, I'm honestly not sure. I genuinely don't know, and that's what makes it exciting.
Well, I will hopefully get to those soon. I have not seen them. They will not be a part of this episode as far as this catch-up episode goes. But at any rate, I do look forward to them, and I'm not at all surprised to see that Horizon Chapter 2 is getting moved. I think that's the right call. That's what it should have been from the beginning. Even going back to earlier this summer, I was very adamant. I was never confident that these films were going to be financially successful.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
Not surprised, but hopefully it means we get them. I would love to see all 4 parts. Like, just as a Costner fan, as someone that wants to experience this saga and its epic qualities, yes, I want to see it. As a cinephile, all day. I want to be there. I want to see it come to fruition. Yeah. But I think from a business perspective, they've made some great moves so far.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. One last thing before we move on to our catch up. Quickly got to talk about the wonderful, the great Shelley Duvall.
Yeah.
Who unfortunately passed away at the age of 75 last week. And you talk about a screen presence. She certainly had it. She's had one of the great runs in the 70s, especially when you look at her work, and not just in The Shining. People will talk about The Shining perhaps first and foremost, but McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Brewster McCloud, Nashville, Three Women. Oh my goodness, her performance in Three Women, Nashville, of course, and many others. She was a formidable actress. Very magnetic screen presence. Yeah. She'll be missed. Absolutely, she'll be missed.
It's amazing. And you look at her IMDb page, when she got her start, her breakthrough role was in Brewster McCloud. The majority of her films in the 1970s were all Robert Altman films. So clearly he saw something in her. And just given that filmography of the movies that she appeared in from Robert Altman, there's an argument to be made that she was shaping up to be the best actress of the 1970s into the 1980s. At the very least, I think we can say that her, not necessarily her performance, but the casting of her in Popeye as Olive Oil might be the greatest casting choice of all time. The most accurate, most accurate representation of how you do a faithful casting choice from that classic comic strip. You don't get more perfect than that. You don't get more perfect than that. And I will agree, as far as her performance in Three Women, that's probably her best performance. In fact, like that should have been sweeping every awards category. I think it's that.
I
good.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I saw someone point this out, and I wholeheartedly agree that when it comes to director actor couples, you think of Scorsese and De Niro and that kind of stuff. I mean, Shelley Duvall and Robert Altman has to be in that conversation as one of the best duos we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, her work is absolutely terrific. I mean, she did a ton of Altman films, and you're right. Like the casting of her in Popeye, and really all of those films.
Yeah,
I mean, she was a presence for sure. Yeah, I mean, and Three Women is the one that immediately comes to mind. Like that's the one that I absolutely love the most. But she's great in all of those movies, really.
She's great in The Shining. Honestly, one of the big reasons why The Shining is as frightening as it is because of her performance.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not to downplay The Shining, as obvious as that one is. And people were making some really great points surrounding that as well, because there is the myth of, her relationship with Kubrick and the behind the scenes volatility. And that's why she's like, let's not downplay Shelley Duvall's acting abilities. I mean, say what you will about Kubrick, and maybe there was some volatility. Her performance is great in that film because she was a great actress.
Yeah, that's the simple answer. That's the simple answer. So even if there was some volatility, she must have done something to take advantage of that for that performance. Yeah. And I'm glad you call it a myth, because it's something that I fully bought into, but nowadays I'm not so sure anymore if there is even really any truth in that volatility. All I know is that when I watch that movie, I see a great performance. That's a great performance. That's what I see.
Yeah, and I just, knowing who she is as an actress and all of these other films, we have a mountain of evidence to suggest that she's a great actress.
Yeah.
You cannot convince me that Kubrick yelling at her or doing whatever he did is the reason she's good in that film. Get out of here with that nonsense. He might have been volatile. Who knows? Maybe he did yell at her. I think it is a little bit more of a myth. I don't know how much truth there is to it. But even if that is true, she's a great actress. That's why she's great in that film.
Yeah, despite winning a Razzie.
That comes down to. Yeah, ridiculous. At any rate, she was fantastic, and her run through the 70s and 80s is as good as any actress to work in Hollywood.
I think retroactively, we look at her work in the 70s, especially. I think she is one of the best actresses of that decade. I really do.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all for feeling that way. But she would be missed. A great actress, and our thoughts certainly go out to her friends and family.
Absolutely.
All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee.
Is that what you're drinking right now?
You better believe it.
Oh my gosh!
I'm drinking cold brew blend specifically.
For context, for those listening and watching right now, we're recording this after 11 p.m. Eastern time.
Or is it? Maybe it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
Or
never know.
It's 11 p.m. Eastern time. Either way,
it's 9 o'clock somewhere.
Either way, it's proof that there's always a good time to drink well-balanced and great tasting coffee.
I mean,
that's how good this coffee is.
That's what I love about Coffee Cult, because they make coffee so good that it's undeniable at any time of day, at any hour. I'm obviously not going to bed till 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's fine because this is amazing coffee.
You got the jitters already. I can see it, but it's worth
so
it.
Good. It's so good.
Gosh, yeah.
And so I'm drinking the cold brew blend, and while you might be sitting there thinking, well, I don't know how to make cold brew. One, it's very easy if you want to make cold brew. Coffee Cult actually has instructions on their website if you want to check it out. It's very easy. Also, a lot of machines these days, a lot of modern machines come with a cold brew setting.
Yeah.
That makes it very easy. That's simply what I use for mine. And as cold brew, if you like cold brew, you have to check this out because it's not the kind of cold brew you buy at the store.
Right.
Usually cold brew that comes in cans at your grocery stores, it's not cold brew because of FDA regulations and to make it shelf sustainable. It's usually not cold brew.
Yeah,
It
with
is-
those, you're basically drinking like coffee flavored energy drinks. By that
Yeah, well,
point.
it's brewed coffee that's just chilled. That's usually what it is. But it's packaged and marketed as cold brew.
Right.
Where this, if you buy the cold brew blend, which is designed specifically for cold brew, you can get a bag of it. You can do it at home. It's easy. It's super convenient. And it is so good. This is way better than anything you're going to buy at a store anyway. Because it's
sure.
specialty grade coffee, for one. And they then take that incredible coffee and design it for cold brew. And it's just the best. It's unbelievably good. So, I mean, you don't have to put milk and sugar in this. It's incredible
Taste
as
is
cold
there.
brew.
And it's
Like
natural. It's all natural, all organic, all from the actual ingredients themselves, providing
Exactly.
those tastes that you love from coffee that makes it so palatable.
Exactly. Like if you go to other coffee shops, not going to name names, but you go to other coffee shops and how do they sell their cold brew? It's get this chocolate cream cold brew, get this caramel nonsense cold brew. Like that's usually how they package. They want to fill it with chocolate and caramel and creams because the coffee's just not that good.
Yeah.
And they want to
caffeinated
sell
milk.
you sugar and
Caffeinated
calories.
milk. That's what it is.
That's what they want to sell you. This cold brew is incredible on its own. You don't need to add anything to it. All I put in here is ice, and that's it. And it's incredible. Like it's a great coffee. So if you want to get that for the summertime, there's all kinds of other great coffees on there as well. Dark roast, bourbon barrel is back on.
So good.
on
Yeah,
the
that's my
lot.
favorite.
So you can get all of that. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF24 at checkout. Again, that code is ISF24 at checkout. And you'll get 15% off your order. So go check them out. We promise you'll love them. And we appreciate Coffee Cult for their support. Brendan, I want to talk to you about audiobooks. Don't
talk
you
about
just
reading.
love a good audiobook?
I just love books, but in
Love
audiobook
books?
format, it's great to listen to a great story.
I am in love with Audible. I have probably a couple dozen books downloaded at the current moment. I haven't gone through them all, but I have at least a couple dozen. I am a subscriber. I am constantly on Audible. I love a great audiobook. Last year, I went through all of the Harry Potter books for the first time.
Yeah, fun adventure.
Fun adventure. I might have reread or re-listened to a few of them.
They're
over the
just
last
that
year.
good.
I just enjoy them a lot. But I'm also going through The Lord of the Rings. For the first time, I'm going through The Lord of the Rings, read by the great Andy Serkis.
Oh, of course.
And I am not in love with the writing as much. As blasphemous as that might be to say. Look.
Read The
Tolkien-
Hobbit or listen to The Hobbit. That's the better one. Otherwise, you're just going to get 17 pages of a song.
Yeah, look, and I think that's my issue with Tolkien is that he's thorough to the point that it is a little exhaustive.
Oh, it's funny. That's the thing.
It is a
like-
little funny. And look, I appreciate his thoroughness to the characters and their dynamic and the lore and everything happening. I appreciate it, but it is a little exhaustive when Treebeard goes on for like 19 pages talking about nothing.
I admittedly feel similar to Stephen King, especially with some of his thicker books, like let's say It, for instance,
Mhm.
I feel like he'll go through like 10 pages of just describing a chair and then
Yeah.
finally moving on to something else. It sounds like a similar thing for you as far as J.R.R.
Yeah.
Tolkien's concerned.
Yeah, I just like I have a deep respect for the Lord of the Rings.
The lore
But
is so good. The mythology
yeah,
is
yeah,
great.
the mythology, all of that is so fascinating. But I will say, it does make me admire Peter Jackson, and again, how he adapted that material, like what he changed, how he condensed it. I mean,
The art of
he's
the art
taking
of
so
adaptation.
much. Yeah, I mean, it is fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still having a good time. I just don't love. I don't think I'm in love with Tolkien as much as a lot of people are.
Well, you're going to have a good time because Audible gives you the opportunity to hear those
Yes.
stories through the voice of Andy Serkis. So
Yeah.
like that can't be a bad thing. And thank you to Audible
Yes.
for having that available for you.
Exactly. And and that's what I love about Audible. I can go to any of the books I have on there. I recently downloaded the Ahsoka book that came out a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
I'm really excited to dive into that because I love Ahsoka. And a few more. I downloaded the Dune books. I'm gonna get into those. I haven't
You're
read
getting
those
into
yet.
Frank Herbert. Oh right. I'm
Yep.
curious to hear what you think about that.
So I had some tokens available, and I've loved the movies, but I've never read the books, so I'm going to give those a go. So that's
They have
next on the list once I
they-
get through Lord of the Rings.
The point is that they have so much available, over
And that's the thing,
150,000 titles
exactly.
to choose from for any device that you have. I mean, even so, you're getting in the midst of all these sci-fi, fantasy adventures, these classics. My wife is getting me into some of these new cowboy romance novels by Lila Sage.
God.
Like the Done and Dusted is the first one. They're all part of this saga. I think they're called the Rebel Blue
Yeah.
Ranch saga. Totally not really my thing, but they're kind of enjoyable. But again, it just goes to show the versatility of what Audible
Yeah.
actually offers. There's so much content to pick from.
Exactly. And that's what we love about Audible. So if you want a free download and a 30-day free trial, go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. That's Audible, AUDIBLE, trial, TRIAL, audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. Click that link and you'll get 30 days for free and a free audiobook.
Yeah.
So go and check that out. Tons of great stuff there to listen to. You'll love it. I love it. And we thank Audible for their support. All right, Brendan, let's get into our 2024 catch-up. We
Yeah.
have some films here that we want to talk about that we haven't done a review on, but some films that we've seen we want to talk about.
Yeah.
Where should we go here? Because we have some films that each of us have seen individually, but there's a bunch of crossover here as well.
Yeah, maybe we start with the crossover and kind of treat this as like an epilogue of sorts to our 2024 mid-year report. And that's what makes the timing of this episode very crucial, I feel like. Some of these films we may have indirectly mentioned during that mid-year report. Some of them may have even been good enough to be part of that conversation. So maybe we can at least start with some of those, or start with some of the maybe more well-known ones here that maybe could have gotten an official review that we just didn't have time for, such as Beverly Hills Cop Axel F.
Sure.
Maybe
can start there.
Maybe we'll start there because I feel like out of all of these, that's the one you and I might disagree the most on.
Okay. All right. Well, lay it on me then. What did you think?
It's better than Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Okay.
That's about it.
That's it. That's all you got?
I didn't care for it that much, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I think it's not the worst one. I think it is certainly better than whatever the heck Beverly Hills Cop 3 was, which was, maybe it was trying something different. I don't know, but it felt like such a betrayal of the ethos of this franchise in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Axel F is the blandest one of the four. It just, the entire runtime here felt like an extended Super Bowl commercial for something that wasn't a Beverly Hills Cop sequel. And aside from the mansion scene, there's really two mansion scenes. There's one that takes place as like a tour of sorts, and then there's the mansion action set piece that closes the film. I think those are creatively handled. I think those are pretty well done.
Okay.
But I didn't find much creativity in this one like I did the first two outings. And even Eddie Murphy felt like he was a little stifled. And I think it's because he gets stuck with a father-daughter dynamic that didn't work for me, if I'm being honest. And I like both of these actors, but the overall idea and the conceit of that, I didn't really feel like had a place in this franchise very well for me. I think tonally it just felt kind of off. So I think it's a missed opportunity, unfortunately. I really wanted to like this one because I like that the cast is back, or at least the core members are back. And I kind of like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt of it all. I actually think he's pretty fun in it. But I hate to use the words creatively bankrupt because I feel like that's very harsh. But it kind of felt that way to me. It really did. I will say there's a cameo on a golf course that literally broke my brain. if the movie's worth watching for any reason, it's weirdly for that cameo, I'll simply say.
Okay.
I wanted to like this one so much more. I really did. I was really pulling for it. I thought the marketing was selling something really, really entertaining, and I didn't get it. I sadly didn't get it.
Okay. I agree with you that it's better than 3 for sure. It doesn't come nearly as close to 1 and 2. And maybe my biggest hot take is I think that the second Beverly Hills Cop is better than the first. Don't tell anyone. But that's kind of where I sit on it.
Told the world in whisper form. It's still out there.
Oh, is that out there? Oh, no.
It's out there.
At any rate,
Hey,
I think the first two films
it's a good
are very
movie.
good.
It's a good movie.
The first two are very good. I just think the second one is more laugh out loud funny. Like the humor is more effective in
the
that film.
improvisational nature of Eddie Murphy in that one does go a long way, and that really helps it.
That, yeah. So that's, but they're both kind of on the same playing level as far as I'm concerned. But I do find the second one funnier. The third one is terrible. It's garbage.
Yeah.
Axel F is certainly a step up from that, even if it doesn't come close to the heights of the first two. It is reliant on nostalgia. It's very heavy on nostalgia. And admittedly, maybe because 3 is so bad, there's something about going back to the familiar that I did find that enjoyable, especially when you couple it with what you're talking about, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt of this film, which I think is also refreshing and a nice energy that I really loved. His dynamic with Eddie Murphy was very good. So
Sure.
I do think there are elements here that make it more than enjoyable. Is it a little dull and bland, especially in the back half? Absolutely. Is it a little creatively uninspired? Yes, I think it simply leans on tropes from the first two films and tries to copy them in a way that is, it's a little bland. There's no way around that. Especially, I think what was really frustrating to me, and I know that I'm going to have red and white colored glasses here, but I think the first 10 minutes of the film that takes place at the LCA in Detroit is genuinely inspired stuff. Like, it is really, really funny. It's great. Yeah. It takes place at a real Detroit Red Wings game from last season, which
I'll give you that.
Subjectively speaking, got me all giddy.
And I'm not a Red Wings. Yeah, and I'm not even a Red Wings fan. I will agree. The opening set piece, or just the opening sequence itself, was pretty fun. So
it's really great.
It sets the stage fairly well.
It's very fun. It's inventive, and I think it does a great job of taking the character and utilizing his sense of humor in a great way that feels of a piece to that character.
Sure.
And there's some really great jokes in there about him being a goalie from Toronto or Winnipeg. Winnipeg is what he said.
I think it was Winnipeg. Yeah, it was Winnipeg.
So good.
I
love all of that.
Yeah, so there was nowhere for the film to go but down.
And that's the thing. Like, the first 10 minutes gets a full star on Letterboxd because it does feel creative and inspired in a way that is in line with the first two films. And then from there, it does fall off a cliff in terms of that creativity. I do agree. So that's where the disappointment comes. But I enjoyed the nostalgia enough. I enjoyed the Joseph Gordon-Levitt enough, and of course the Eddie Murphy of it all enough that I had fun with it. But it's a step down from the first two, but boy, is it better than the third one, though.
Yeah, that's right. Did you like the father-daughter dynamic in
No,
here at all?
that's all. That's the worst part of the film.
Okay,
It's not,
okay.
Like
I'm
don't
glad we
think
can at least agree with that.
The film and either actor involved, I just don't think anyone cared. I don't think anyone.
I don't think
gave
so.
any
And I love,
effort into it.
I love both of these actors, especially Taylor Page. What was it, Zola, that we
Yeah.
talked about some years ago? Great, film, great performance there too. There's this is where I think calling it creatively bankrupt might be fair, because it's not providing the right form of inspiration for these actors to take advantage of that material and deliver something memorable, and that's unfortunate.
I agree. So that's where I'm at. I think I give it 3 stars on Letterboxd, something like that. So
I think I gave it 2. I was kind of straddling between 2 and 2.5, but
well, if you include the opening, in which I gave it a full star for that alone, then we're mostly similar.
Okay. Well, then we agree on this one. I guess I saw that star rating of yours on Letterboxd and thought maybe we might disagree on this, but no, I guess not. Okay, you're conflating it because of your red and white goggles.
Exactly. Yeah. So
okay, all right,
there you
good
go.
to know.
So Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Where do you want to go next?
Great question. You want to talk about something that I know we both really, really like?
Sure.
How about Sometimes I Think About Dying?
Oh my God. Yes. I love this movie.
I
almost included
it.
I almost included it in our top 5 for best films of the year so far. Like I really went for this movie.
It was admittedly a blind spot at the time we did that list, but now that I've seen it in preparation for this conversation we're about to have, it may have ended up in my top 10. A lot of it is because of Daisy Ridley. And it's weird to say that given this movie, and what was the other movie that she was in earlier this year that got some surprising love? I didn't see it. It was a Young Woman in the Sea.
Yes, that's a blind spot for me at this point.
Yeah, haven't seen it, but I know that it's been received in a certain way where it's almost like Daisy Ridley is coming back into the spotlight. How weird is it to say that we're finding ourselves like in the middle of like this Daisy Ridley renaissance? Someone that starred in the Star Wars sequels, only 10 years later, we have a renaissance coming for her.
I love it. Yeah, it's crazy.
She is genuinely fantastic in this movie. Sometimes I think about dying. I think the movie itself that she is in is certainly still good, but this is a great example of a performance really doing the necessary work to turn it into something great. There are some creative flourishes here from a filmmaking standpoint, especially some of those moments of, I don't know if I want to call it magical realism because it's meant to be kind of imaginary, but they weirdly reminded me of Roy Anderson, the filmmaker of movies like About Endlessness and A Pigeon Sat in a Branch reflecting.
Yeah,
like
sure.
It kind of had that quirky vibe coupled with the music and sort of the plain stationary camera placement of all of it. Like that surrealistic quality reminded me of Roy Anderson a bit. And I admired that for a film that was more passive in its filmmaking approach, which I do appreciate about the film from Rachel Lambert. She takes that back seat where she needs to allow Daisy Ridley's performance to really shine through. And there's so much about her performance that I love. It's one of those performances that doesn't provide character backstory, yet you keep thinking about what it might be. You want to infer something about her because of what she's doing to fill in those gaps. The insecurities, it almost, I think I saw some other people saying this, so I can't take credit for it, but it almost sits on maybe the line of being on the spectrum, the autism spectrum in a way. I don't know. I again, that's not my observation. I've heard a few other people say that, but I think it might be a pretty fair observation. But like the fact that you can look at it in a certain way like that, I think allows that room for interpretation that makes the film more interesting and why her performance is so good. There's a lot of great things there for sure.
Yeah, I don't have any knowledge about that to infer one way or another as far as that goes. Yeah. But I'm
not saying it's there or that it's not. It's just something I saw some people say. So I'm just referencing the possibility of seeing it that way.
I didn't sense any of that, but that's again because of my own ignorance to how any of that works. But what I did see though is a young woman who is in a deep, doleful loneliness and has this appetite, this thirst for dying that comes through in these incredibly brooding yet kind of beautiful, at least visually speaking, looking flashbacks, or not really flashbacks, but to your point, like these quirky I guess like visuals that of her kind of thinking about her own death and how that comes through in this very simple yet awkward relationship that blossoms for her throughout the film. I loved all of that and how it kind of works in this Joe Swanberg, let's make this up as we go kind of vibe. I don't know anything about Rachel Lambert and her filmmaking style. There are a couple of screenwriters attached to this, and I know it's based off of a short film that was released a few years ago, something to that effect. And it's based off of a 2014 play as well. Okay. And I haven't seen the play, haven't seen the short film.
Same here.
But what I do know is that there is this organic quality to the film that I really do love. And I think the dynamic between Fran and Robert, is that the character's name?
Yes, Robert.
Yeah, Fran and Robert throughout the film, I think is absolutely fantastic. And like there's
very
a
charming
naturality to it. It's charming, it's funny. They're two totally different characters, yet they find a sense of loneliness in each other that I think is just great to see, and I just love Daisy Ridley here. Like she really taps into that sorrow and the character in these really gorgeous ways. I mean, she says like 13 words in this whole movie. Like it is all done through expressionism and this internalized performance that I just absolutely adore. Like, I don't know if I don't know, probably it's the limitation of Daisy Ridley hasn't done a whole lot outside of Star Wars. Some of it is perhaps what we have seen with her in Star Wars. And I think she's honestly one of the more underrated aspects of that sequel trilogy. I think her performance
same
as
she's great in those movies.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And I don't think that's talked about enough. But this is such a wildly different performance as well that maybe you just don't expect based off of her resume, but she's so good here. Like that quiet stillness that she has in this film is breathtaking. It is.
I just wanted to hug her. I just wanted to give her a hug.
Yeah, she's adorable.
But it's a performance that it works because any other actor that's not in the right mindset could easily oversell it to the point that it just comes off as mopey. And this one doesn't. She straddles that line perfectly to the point of sympathy without making it mopey, like I said. And I think she does that really well. You're right. She barely even speaks in the movie. And when she does, she takes advantage of that speech in very different ways. I think where her performance works even best for me is when you see that slight bit of confidence finally come out of her. There's a scene in a bathtub, I'll simply say, when they're playing this game, which first off, it's ironic given the game that they're playing, and she is someone that's clearly more gifted at this game because of what she constantly thinks about.
Yes, exactly.
But there's a tenderness even in the way that she says that line of dialogue, as if she's realizing, I can partake in this world a little bit more than I have before. And that realization is really sweet, honestly.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of the film. It's not as if Fran is depressed in, let's say, like a psychological or even a clinical way. There's clearly a sorrow there, and she thinks about dying. But I think much of how that manifests in this film isn't dissimilar to how, as you get older, you think about death and dying organically. Like there's just a natural process of you thinking about it more as you get older, and you couple that with this, internalized shy personality that she has, you do sense loneliness in the character, but what comes out as a result of her relationship with Robert and them going out to have dinner together, and they meet the waitress, they have some pie, they end up going to the house, and you start to realize that Fran isn't wanting to die again in a clinical way. She just simply doesn't know how to express herself until these relationships start to form. And she just needed someone to help bring that out of her. And that to me, I think, is the beauty of that relationship. They see something in each other and they're able to lift each other out of this grasp that had a hold on them. They kind of lift each other up. And I think that's what I love so much about that final shot of the film, where it is this catharsis and it's the both of them kind of embracing each other, because it is about the two of them lifting each other up and giving each other a sense of purpose that I just find extremely beautiful.
I didn't think about this, but as we're talking about it further, I already mentioned how this film reminded me a little bit of Roy Anderson, and you also mentioned Joe Swanberg there. I think those are definitely more apt comparisons from an aesthetic standpoint, but the way this narrative moves and arrives from A to B to Z also weirdly kind of reminded me of Punch Drunk Love.
Okay.
And I think both movies maybe do some similar things by taking a central performance and a central character. It's not about the diagnosis, as you're talking about. That's not what's important, but it does allow you to infer certain things about where those behavioral traits might be coming from. Like, I've heard a lot of people talk about how Punch Drunk Love is a movie that's ultimately about social anxiety disorder. And maybe there's some of that here too. It's not about that, but I think that's what makes her performance, Daisy Ridley's performance specifically, so good, is it doesn't become about a thing. It could be about anything. And that's why I've seen some people maybe relate to this in a certain way that might be about it being on the spectrum or something like that. I think it allows for that kind of invitation, which I think it's great. We need movies that do that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to downplay any of the potential clinical psychological aspects at play. Maybe
no,
that
and I'm
is
not
what
saying
the
that
film
you
is
are.
going for. I really don't know, but regardless of where the characters are in relation to any of that, I still think it plays out the same in terms of how you have a woman who is, yes, she's lonely and sad, but she is willing to cling to life the moment she finds a cipher to express herself.
Yeah.
And to feel herself a little bit. And I think that's what's interesting about her dynamic, her evolution, because it's not as if she's completely innocent. Like, she does kind of provoke Robert in a way that is maybe indicative of what you're talking about, like socially awkward, still trying to figure it out. But you can see it, especially in the performance, that she does want it. She wants that relationship. She wants to explore that, but she doesn't know how.
Right.
And she can't, she doesn't know how to bust through the guardrails that are keeping her stuck in that sorrow. But the moment she expresses that to Robert in those final shots, it's breathtaking.
Yeah.
And I love how the film goes about exploring that.
It's one of the better performances of the year, and I really hope we remember this one by the time. The musical score is great as well. There are a lot of attributes here that are really clever.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good movie. I really liked it a lot. It's one of my favorite surprises of the year, and certainly one of my favorite performances of the year to this point as well.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, where do you want to go next?
That's a great question. Do I have to decide? I decided those first two. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, you want to talk about the documentary Sperm World?
We can talk about that. Yeah, I stand by what I said during our 2024 mid-year report, that it's the best documentary of the year so far, and I still stand by that. I haven't seen anything better than this. Between this film and Some Kind of Heaven, the two films that Lance Oppenheim has directed, I feel like he's the documentarian response to Sean Baker. I sense so much
Sure.
of Sean Baker in both of these movies, not even just aesthetically, but the fact that they both depict this like certain underbelly of America that we don't normally see. And I find that fascinating. This is a world we don't often talk about. And when we hear about it, our instinct is maybe to kind of scuffle at it, find it kind of gross or something.
Yeah.
But this actually paints it as kind of a genuine affection for simply helping people to like become familial in a way. Like, it's an interesting twist on what you might be expecting or what you've been brought up to think. And I like that the film does that. It has multiple threads that have their own individual arcs to them. And I think it balances them pretty well too. So yeah, very good documentary and depicts a world that we just don't normally see.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many docs this year, but this is by far the best one.
Yeah.
And honestly, one of the better films I've seen of the summer. Like, this is a really, really good movie. And what I love about it is that it simultaneously exploits why some American systems are just fundamentally just awful.
Yeah.
Like there like people that struggle to get pregnant. If you want to find a solution to that, it is really hard for a lot of people because that is a very lengthy and financially cumbersome process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it turns out that when these things happen, people will find other ways around the system.
Yeah.
And I love how this film introduces that world and how people get involved in it. And once you do get involved in this world, it's easy to understand why relationships get strained. And I love the emotional and ethical nuance at play in this film as far as going around the system, why the system is broken. But there's also this, at least with the individuals we see here, like there's an earnestness to these guys. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They simply care about people. They understand that there are needs that people can't meet, and they can't rely on the system to meet those needs. So we have to find a different way.
Yeah.
But when you're offering up yourself in the ways that these guys are, it's going to make things weird. And things get very weird at times.
I think that's what I like about Oppenheim's filmmaking is that even despite the earnestness that you're talking about, there is still like a perceived creepiness to it as well, as if he's playing with our expectations or how we were brought to think about these people growing up. So I like that he plays with that while also subverting that simultaneously. And I think you make a great point as well that this isn't necessarily a one-sided argument. If anything, it's suggesting that these individuals that are part of this system, this specific movement we're talking about, not the American system that's problematic as you're referring to, but this specific business that we're talking about, the people partaking in it are sincere. Like there's a sincere desire to help people that need to go around the system to get what they want, which is to become pregnant. That's what their goal is. They want to they want to start a family, and this is the way they have to go about it. But the film doesn't shy away from how that could potentially cause very big strains between these individuals after they have partaken in this process. And it doesn't help everybody, we'll simply say. And I think that's the great thing about the movie.
Exactly. Like the ramifications we see here, the emotional toll it has on some of these individuals.
Yeah.
I do love the varying aspects we get because you have one guy who's the father of like 147 kids. Then there's another gentleman that's involved, but he has a wife. And that gets a little strained, a little weird at times because she feels as if his job providing semen for these women that need it to get pregnant, that's more of a priority at times.
Yeah.
And I love how the film explores that. Or there's the, and forgive me, I can't remember any of these people's names. It's been a while since I've seen it. But you have the older guy and the 20-ish, 25-ish young woman who's trying to get pregnant, and like that's a weird dynamic, and she struggles to get pregnant, and what does that relationship then look like? Like, how does that evolve over time? Like, it's just really, really fascinating to see these various components and nuances to this world and how it functions.
Yeah. And it made me think about, like, what if I had to indirectly play a part in this? What if it gets to a point where my wife and I want to have kids, and what if we can't? What if something happens that this is the only other option? How would that make me feel about that? Like, I'm not saying that this is something we would do. That's not what I'm saying, but the film does a good job inviting you into the conversation in that way, is what I'm trying to say. And I think great documentaries are conversation starters like that. They're not necessarily debate makers, but they're conversation starters and conversation participants. And it did make me think about it in that way, whether it be myself or someone that I know. How would I feel about maybe someone that I know partaking in this process because they had to? It makes you wrestle with those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Highly recommend that one. I think there are three more where we cross over. I don't know if we need to get into these too much here. Let's quickly note the greatest hits, though. And I want to bring this one up because it is directed by Ned Benson. And we had talked about this some months ago now, that we were looking forward to this film. I know at least I was, because we haven't seen Ned Benson in literally a decade. It has been 10 years.
He disappeared like Eleanor Rigby.
He disappeared like Eleanor Rigby. But I love those films. If you're not familiar with the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, it was a trio of films that came out in 2014. They had three different perspectives. It was about a couple, a tragedy they experienced. One film was from his perspective. The other film was from her perspective. And then there was a combined perspective. And that whole experiment I loved. It was great. It was one of my favorite films of that year. And then he disappeared like Eleanor Rigby. And he came back with the greatest hits earlier this year, which I saw. And then you and I we never found a great time to really discuss it or find it on the schedule. So,
I think it was less so that, JD, and more so we just didn't really have much of an urge to talk about it after we saw it.
Well, that too. Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, is it's not great, right?
It sadly isn't. It's a half-baked and wasted concept, and it's a concept that's right up my alley. You know, the whole vinyl music concept, and the whole idea that music is this almost magical mirror into how you're feeling. It's kind of a trite concept. We've heard that idea many times, but I like when it's funneled through movies in an artful way. The problem here is I just don't think that Ned Benson has any faith in this material. He has this constant need to handhold us the entire way, which is so antithetical to the actual music that's being depicted here, which is very artful. It's very nuanced. It's very poetic. And this movie doesn't really have any of that. I was mixed on the movie overall. If there's anything positive here, it really does come down to the performances. I think they're mostly all good. I like Lucy Boynton. I love Justin H. Min here. But I think this is a missed opportunity, especially given the success of those prior films 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much to add to that. It was a real disappointment. I don't think the film is particularly egregious. It's just very middle of the road. It's trite. And it just doesn't seem to have much conviction. And after what I saw with the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, I would not have expected that like the guy that had that kind of creative vision come into this and make the most bland thing possible.
Yeah.
Like this is more bland than Axel F, if you ask me. And
I could agree with that.
it's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. But I will say though, Justin H. Min continues to be a favorite of mine, and I want to see more of this guy. He is really charming and funny in this film. He's great. He's very good.
He's good.
He is the highlight as far as I'm concerned, and I need more Justin H. Min in my life.
I think
so there it is.
He's ultimately the reason why I may have graded this higher than something like Axel F, even though I don't disagree that this is blander when compared to that film. But I think his performance in particular here is maybe the thing that it certainly doesn't save the movie, but it at least does potentially identify where its emotional core could have been. And in his scenes in particular, I think are pretty strong.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah, he's very, very good. The strongest part of that film as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Let's quickly talk about Suncoast. So this is a film from Laura Chin, and it came out pretty early on in the year, but was like in those first few months, people were really going for it and talking about it as
it
one
got
of
dropped
the
on
best film.
Yeah, kind of got dropped on Hulu, and I think that's maybe where it lost itself.
Yeah. At the time, though, like I would say, even up till May, it was talked about as one of the best hidden gems of the year, and so it was a film that I really wanted to catch up with. But before I get into it, what did you think of it?
Well, I think it's good. I think it's charming. It's a rather sweet coming of age tale about what it means for a child specifically to come to terms with losing a loved one, and how they might feel rather alienated when your parental figure actually copes at this thing even less successfully than the child does. So I appreciate that. Apparently this was something that was like semi-autobiographical for writer and director Laura Chin, if I'm not mistaken. And I will say, like, there is a sincerity here. It does feel like there is a genuine conviction to the actual story and what she wanted to tell. And I think it is paired pretty well with the real life Terry Schiavo case as it's overlapping this world.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And I also appreciate that the film doesn't really take a stance on this issue of euthanasia as surrounding the Terry Schiavo case. It's more or less there to be a symbolic parallel to what is going on with this family. I do think Nico Parker here as the central child is quite great. So I think there are definitely good things here. I think the film has a difficult task of balancing at least 3 major plot threads, and I just don't think the experience is all that seamless. And then there are some of the performances here, which we might talk about as well, that I have some questions about. And I say as questions because I've never experienced some of these things that these characters are going through myself. I've never had a parent react a certain way that, let's say, Laura Linney as the mother reacts to. Like, I've never experienced that. The volatility of her here is very intense. Is it too intense? I'm kind of wrestling with that. If the performance is too good or not. So that, I'm wrestling with some certain things there. I think it's kind of a messy film, but it has a sincerity and a conviction that I responded to.
Yeah, I mean, I thankfully, knock on wood, haven't experienced this, and hopefully I don't. But I think Laura Linney is terrific when I think about it from a parental perspective and put myself in her shoes. There is going to be a level of volatility there. I think what's so interesting about this film is that while the Terry Schiavo of it all lingers in the background, and it mostly is there as a backdrop, as a way to draw you into the ethical dilemmas at play, even though this film isn't about those ethical dilemmas, the backdrop is always there lingering as a way to understand some of that volatility. which I do think is important because ultimately what this film is it's about this young woman whose brother is dying similarly, is in this very dire situation. But the film it's from her perspective, right? So it's about her understanding what is going on in her family with her brother dying. So there is a level of empathy that her mother is volatile. Yet at the same time, she herself is equally neglected and expected to be mature beyond her years. That's a fascinating duality that does affect the Doris character in this fascinating way. And how the film goes about exploring that, it is a little messy at times, but I do really love that idea. And I think it gets more right than it doesn't.
Sure.
At times, the conflict that comes about is a little movie-ish. I think maybe that's my biggest frustration, is that I think there was room to play with realism here in a way that maybe could have amped up or heightened that volatility and the duality with Doris in a way that felt more in line with the gravitas of what's actually happening with this family. But
Sure.
it is a Hulu film, so maybe that is to be expected.
Yeah,
a
maybe.
little bit. But so, some of the movie-ish things aside, like I think that's a fascinating premise. The idea
Agreed.
that your brother is dying, your mother is taking care of him constantly, looking after him, and as a result, you're left to your own devices.
Yeah.
You're expected to be mature beyond being 15, but you're also 15 and you make choices as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Like that, I think is interesting. And to see the film explore that here, I think is compelling. The Woody Harrelson of it all, I think gets a little lost. I think that's a little jumbled in the editing.
I like him. I mean, I like him pretty much everything I ever see him in. he's one of the big reasons why I can't hate a movie like The Glass Castle, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
Mostly because of his presence, and I like his presence here. I think it's just utilization that feels underutilized, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a film I really like. Like I did really like it. You can feel, or you can see the seams. You can see the manufacturing of it a little bit at times, but mostly it was a fun early surprise of the year.
Okay.
I really liked it. The last film, as far as crossover goes, and we don't have to spend hardly any time here. You and I, unfortunately, saw Unfrosted. Terrible movie. Just really bad.
I didn't hate it like most others did, but it is not good. The problem, it's just tiring. I just found it so tiring.
I think it is a colossal waste of time.
I would have probably liked it a lot more if it focused on Amy Schumer and Max Greenfield. Their dynamic I actually kind of liked. But pretty much everyone else, I felt exhausted pretty early on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exhausting is certainly a word I can agree with. It is definitely that.
I feel pretty exhausted just talking about it as much as we did.
Yeah, exactly. It is not even close the worst film I've seen this year.
There are cameos in this movie that turn me into jelly. I am baffled that they exist. I'll simply say that.
I agree. Okay, so let's quickly talk about some films that you and I saw separately. I want to hear about In a Violent Nature. That's a horror film that I hope to catch up with soon. It's on my list. I will hopefully see that next week as I'm on vacation. I'm going to download it and maybe give that a go one night. Tell me about that one. What did you think?
I don't know if I want to give my thoughts on that one because I don't want to give you expectations. I know this movie has been very divisive. I know some people who have really liked it, some who have not. I'll just say I did not go for it. I don't want to get into too many reasons why, though, unless you've already seen my Letterboxd review. I don't know if you've read that.
No,
yet.
I haven't. Not too much.
Well, I don't want to create expectations for you because some of the things that didn't work for me might work for you.
Okay.
And it might just be more of a matter of taste when it comes to this story. It's a pretty fascinating conceit, basically saying, what if Jason Voorhees was the main character? What would a movie be like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the camera just slowly follows this slasher killer as he goes about his business, and it kind of creates this prolonged sense of pain and sadness.
Hmm.
And if that's the goal, okay, I guess the film succeeds, but it also raises a question. Do any of us ever even want to see Jason as the main character? I don't know if that's something I really care to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I don't need to see Mike Myers as the main character. And to be fair, when I say main character, I just really mean the cipher that we follow.
Yeah.
This killer that we get here, I think his name is Johnny, is still kind of a blank slate. There's
Yeah.
not really much characterization outside of maybe a little bit of mythology that we get that may or may not be true. But the character is still kind of blank. If it is really meant to showcase how slow moving their lives are, I mean, it certainly gets that point across very well. It just might not be the most interesting point to ever make. And I think
Okay.
that's really its biggest problem. When it comes to these kind of movies, I selfishly prefer the schlock. I would much rather
Yeah.
watch Friday the 13th Part 7, Jason Takes Manhattan or something. I would much rather watch something like that. Or Jason X. I think those movies are
Does
just...
it have like a serious tone to it?
Yes. And this is my biggest problem. Okay, you know, you kind of raised a question. I feel like I have to get into it now. And this is the thing I
Okay.
didn't want to say because I'm curious how you feel about this.
Okay.
It does have a pretty serious and methodical tone to it. And it does not mesh well with the brutality of the kills that we get. There are a few kills here that are very, very brutal to the point that I thought they were incredibly silly. There's one in particular that I think is the one most people are citing as the
Like,
really
oh
cool.
my God, you won't
effective.
believe this one. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one in particular, and the reason why I think it's the one that people are responding to is because it's really the first one that emphasizes that brutality in such a way that, oh, the movie's going there. Okay. It felt like something out of Scary Movie to me. It's
wow.
and I think it might just be the limitations of the film's budget. In that it kind of maybe inadvertently has this campiness to it. And it's here where I feel like, okay, now it's going for schlock, even if it might not be trying to, when the rest of the movie isn't. So there's no tonal synergy happening here.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I didn't want to get into right here, because I wanted to see if you responded to the kills in a different way than I did. But they did not jive with the overall intent of this movie, I think. And as a result, the movie just, I don't think it works. I think it's a interesting conceit that ends up becoming a very uninteresting conceit by the end.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't go for this one, sadly.
Yeah, I am interested in this one because of some of the conversation surrounding the film, to be perfectly honest with you. I have talked about this a lot on the show before, but part of my reservation with the horror genre pre-starting InSession Film, aside from the fact that, you know, scaredy cat and all that sort of stuff.
I was gonna say,
But that aside, I was never much of a fan of horror schlock. And the, you know, like you have like the Jasons of the world and all of that. It never really compelled me to sit and watch a bunch of myopic and obtuse teenagers make bad decisions and get their heads chopped off for an hour and a half. Like that just never really compelled me.
well,
So
yeah, and you basically
to-
get that here. It's basically the same narrative. It's just from a different perspective.
from a different but and that just makes it all the more crazy to me. Like that's the perspective we're gonna get. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe if you remove the obtuseness of the teenagers' decisions, maybe there's more to it that makes sense. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I will say horror is a genre I've come around on completely 180. Like it's the genre I've
I know.
embraced the most.
I
since
love that you
doing
came
the
of
show.
age.
So I am compelled. I am curious to see how I would respond to it. I don't know if that nostalgia, that old school way of thinking will creep its way into this film. I don't know. I will say this, when people are talking about how slow and methodical it is, and it's a killer walking around for most of the time, that raises the bells for me to go, okay, now they're speaking my language. When people hate it, when it's just a character walking through the woods, yes, sign me up. That's the stuff I want. I love slow cinema. I love methodical cinema. Give me that all day. So like they sold me on that.
Let's see if you go for this then, because yes, this is definitely slow cinema. I think the question I have is it the right outlet for that slow cinema? And
And
I
maybe
don't
not.
think it was.
Maybe
I
the
don't think it
answer
was.
is not.
I
The
don't think it
tone
was.
is the curious part, because I do agree with you. If it takes itself too seriously, but the kills are like come off as schlock and silly, then that will be a problem. No doubt about it. And that always concerned me with that film. That's why I wanted to ask. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's, like I said, that's the thing I was a little reserved about giving my thoughts on, because I didn't want to set those expectations up for you. I didn't want you to go in knowing that there's a possibility that these brutal kills could come off as corny. And I think they do. I ultimately think they do. And I don't think it jives with the final product.
Okay. All right, let's move on to another film. I'm going to talk about The Imaginary. This is an anime film that dropped on Netflix a few weeks ago from Yoshiyuki Momose. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Forgive me if I'm butchering that name. So I want to say I briefly mentioned this. I forget on which review it was. It might have been Inside Out 2. I can't really recall, or maybe it was a main show conversation. But The Imaginary is interesting because it continues a trend of imaginary friends. Like Bing Bong truly inspires, because you get The Imaginary this year. We also have If, that came out a month ago as well. So there's something about imaginary friends coming back into the fold. It's a big thing now.
Yeah, a lot of ifs.
However, The Imaginary is also very comparable to the Toy Story movies. So the premise of the film is that, you know, it centers around this little girl, and she has an imaginary friend by the name of Roger. And so Roger is her imaginary, and they can speak to each other. However, there comes a point where Roger is separated from Amanda, his little girl that he's tied to. And as a result, the world starts to expand, and you get a bunch of mythology and world building. And what we come to find out is that over time, as you get older, as you somewhat see in Inside Out from 2015, you lose those imaginary friends. And what happens to them that's a little different from Inside Out in the context of this film and its world building is that it's that Toy Story thing of these imaginaries feeling abandoned and having to find a new home, so to speak. So there's a lot of thematic parallels to the Toy Story movies, except instead of toys feeling abandoned and how they feel about that, it's these imaginaries feeling abandoned and having to wrestle with that emotional turmoil. It's very similar in that regard. Now, narratively, of course, it's its own thing, and it plays out in a very, very anime kind of way. There is a lot of creative, fantastical elements to the film that are rendered really great in terms of the animation. I do really like the animation here. I think my problem with the film is that it sadly gets bogged down in way too much lore and world building, as cool as it is. And I appreciate it's thematic intense, but a lot of the mechanics are working simultaneously against each other. There's a middle sequence in the film that is extremely murky as far as how it functions within the story. It has its heart in the right place.
Okay.
It has affable intentions. I just don't think the writing and the storytelling is seamless. It's just jumbled. It's messy, very choppy, and it may be a little derivative. But I can forgive the triteness of the film because of the emotionality of it. And it takes some pretty bold risk. I'm not going to lie. When you see what happens to Amanda and how dire that gets, I mean, it takes a risk that I do appreciate. And there is some emotionality that comes out of it. But the storytelling on the whole, just a little too messy for me. A little too jumbled.
Ultimately, something you'd still recommend, though, given some of those, I guess, emotional cores that it has?
Yeah, I would say a mild recommendation. I don't think you have to run to see this film. It doesn't have to be on top of your priority list, but if you have a Saturday afternoon free and you want to catch up on some animated films on the year, then sure, absolutely give it a go.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe others will find it less problematic than I do in terms of the writing, or you can forgive that a little bit more. In fact, I think our great friend M.N. Miller, who wrote a review of this on our website at InSessionFilm.com, I think he loved it. Like he really went for it.
Okay. Yeah, because I know some people that have gone for it. At least if I go through Letterboxd here and I look at some of my own followers and some of the people that I follow specifically that I trust, I know of a few individuals here that give it some pretty high marks. So I know it has worked for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know some people have really gone for it. I just, for me, it was wholly a writing thing. Like I think the animation is good. I think its heart is in the right place. It just, it's just frustratingly tedious in terms of its narrative mechanics. You know, because like there's one sequence, without getting into too much detail, I guess there's one sequence like 3/4 of the way through this movie that is truly inspiring. Like it is dramatically urgent. It's fascinating. It reminds me of the best of Studio Ghibli in terms of like how they can build such a gripping story with this fantastical animation. And then that is immediately succumbed by these narrative choices that are baffling. That completely take me out of the movie.
So it sounds as though if someone listening wants to find a hidden animated gem on Netflix from this year, we should point them in the direction of Orion in the Dark instead.
Yes, I would I much prefer that to The Imaginary.
Yeah.
Personally,
good movie that one is.
Yes, I agree. I know we're kind of running low on time. There's a few more here that we want to get to. I don't think we'll have enough time to get to everything. So quickly, are there any other films you want to just mention real fast as we wind down?
I'll just mention a few other documentaries. It hasn't been a great year for documentaries outside of Sperm World, if I'm being honest, but there's The Beach Boys on Disney Plus. I think that's very middle of the road. It's very basic. It's very Wikipedia style. On Max is Movie Pass, Movie Crash, which tells a very fascinating story, but I think it might be the most disappointing of the bunch, just given the simplicity of how it conveys that story. I think there's more to it that it doesn't go into, especially from the consumer experience with regard to Movie Pass. That was something I was really hoping to see more insight on. There are a few documentaries that are more docu-series specifically that I think are good for what they are if you're interested in the subject matter. There's Quiet on Set, which is on Max, detailing the life of child actors on Nickelodeon, especially, and some of the trauma that they went through. I think that's a very insightful documentary, a very hard one to watch as well. On Hulu, there's one called Thank You, Goodnight, which is all about the band Bon Jovi. If you're a fan of Bon Jovi, of course, I recommend it. The documentary itself is as good a documentary could be about a band like Bon Jovi. It means it's fine. So you'll probably forget about it in about a couple days. But yeah, there are a few other documentaries / docu-series out there But it's more so to emphasize my point that I hope we see a few more good ones that are very creatively done, like Sperm World was. Because I think it's a medium that can be really interesting when filmmakers utilize it for not just telling factual stories, but using it as their own form of creative storytelling.
Yeah.
Like whether it be something like Dick Johnson is Dead, for instance, one of the best documentaries of the past 10 years. I want to see more of those come out this year, and hopefully we get them.
I agree. Hopefully we get more of those. I haven't seen too many docs that I've loved this year as well.
Yeah.
In addition to Sperm World, another one that I caught up with was Girl State. And I really liked Boy State when that came out a few years ago. And I think Girl State is good. I don't think it's great.
Okay.
And honestly, I hate to phrase it this way. I think its biggest weakness is that it's simply more of the same.
Wow.
But it does, to be fair, that's a little broad and vague. It is more of the same, but it delves into its own specificities when you're talking about femininity and girlhood and that side of the aisle. But a lot of the political aspects of it, like I don't think it quite reaches the nuances of Boy State.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I hate to say it that way because now it feels like I'm championing Boy State over Girl State, and girls have cooties and go boys, and that's not at all what I'm
Boys
trying
rule and
to
girls
express
rule.
here.
That's your review of Girl State. That is not the right review in this time and place right now.
Not at all. Look, it is a good complementary film to Boy State. I just feel like as a movie, Boy State addresses its concerns a little bit better. But
Gotcha. Okay.
that's still a doc I would recommend. If you liked Boy State, I would definitely still recommend going and seeing Girl State.
All right.
Real quickly, Molly Manning Walker had a new film called How to Have Sex. This is a film that we really wanted to try to talk about early on in the year and never could find a spot for it. Starring Mia McKenna Bruce, who is fantastic in that film. She is really, really great. It's a very good movie. Kind of hard to recommend because of its subject matter, but it's fantastic. One of the best films of I'd say like of the first half of the year for sure. Like when we did that top 10 a few weeks ago, it wasn't quite in my top 10. It was just outside my top 10, but really good movie that I definitely encourage everyone to see. And Mia McKenna Bruce still, I think, gives one of the better performances of the year. So far.
That's still on my list. I meant to catch up with that one in time, but it's one I'm going to try to prioritize pretty soon.
The Tig Notaro film, Am I Okay?, starring Dakota Johnson, I thought was fine. Like I liked it. Like it's not anything great, but I think Dakota Johnson is very good and always really charming. Like the storytelling is pretty simple. There's nothing to the film that's going to wow you, but when you move beyond the formula of it all, like, you know, you just have Dakota Johnson being one of the best, and that was enough for me to enjoy that film. So,
all right.
So Am I Okay? That one I believe is out on Max right now.
All right.
And then the last one, going all the way back to late January, early February, the Bob Marley film that came out earlier this year. Sadly, not very good at all.
That's
it
unfortunate.
barely qualifies as a movie. Like the storytelling is, and the editing is weird.
Isn't that just par for the course now when it comes to music biopics? I feel like that's just becoming kind of like the trademark for them.
Yeah, it was very disappointing for someone that deserves a really good story to be told on screen. That it was not very good.
Okay, all right.
But those are the films. That's it. I think we're done.
All right, more to do, more to come. 2024 is going to be a busy one.
Absolutely. So with all of that said, we will not have a main show next week. I am going to be out on vacation. So there will be no main show, but we do have a couple of reviews slated. We are going to have a review for Twisters.
Yeah.
That will come out. In fact, it might come out earlier than normal because of scheduling and getting that review done. It's actually going to get done a little early than normal. So we'll have that on the horizon. And then we're also going to be doing a review of Dandelion, the film that just came out in theaters this last week with Longlegs, another musician kind of film. So there's that.
Yeah. Looking forward to that discussion.
We'll give that one a discussion. So we will have 2 reviews to go out next week while I'm gone. Women in Session will come out next week while I'm gone as well, but no main show. And then when I get back, we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Gotta love it.
As far as this week goes, though, so we there's a new Women in Session episode out right now that you can go and check out. They talk about Tom Cruise. And then we will have reviews of Longlegs. In fact, Longlegs will probably already be out by the time this episode goes live. So you can go and check that out. And actually, Dandelion is coming out this week. The review that's coming out next week that I conflated here is the French film The Beast.
Yes.
And that's one of those films that, speaking of catch-up movies and, best of the year so far, that's a film that you'll find on a lot of top 10 lists for the best films of the first half of the year. That film was on a lot of lists.
It was.
So we wanted to give that one a go. It's one we caught up on, and we'll have a review of that coming out next week while I am gone.
Yep.
But for this week, we have Dandelion and Longlegs. So be on the lookout for all of that. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. You can like the video, all that fun stuff. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us. Really helps out the show there. Check out the InSession Film store on our website, InSessionFilm.com. You can always email us any feedback, InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Great question. I will just once again say, and I think I said this on last week's main show, but this is episode 594. We're getting closer to 600. Got a pretty fun one planned. I like the topic that we have there. I think those of you listening are going to enjoy this one. There's more that Judy and I need.
It's gonna be good.
More we have to talk about as far as what we want to do in solidifying that specific plan. But I think it's going to be a great topic nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. Maybe we'll do some sort of announcement after I get back.
Yeah, that sounds good.
It's coming up. It's going to be very exciting. I cannot wait. I'm getting a little giddy thinking about it. We noted last week, I believe, when teasing it, that it's something we've done before, once before. We're going to do it again. It's going to be great. It's going to be a good time.
I can't wait. And have a safe and fun vacation, JD.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Will do. I look forward to getting away for a week. So everyone behave. The world has gone crazy over the last 14 days. Let's go ahead and calm that down. Let's relax a little bit.
I feel like we need to at least acknowledge it. I don't think we should talk about it, but yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely been a past couple days, we'll simply say.
For sure. I just want to come back to Florida and the world's not set on fire. But who knows? Maybe that's just how it's going to be. Who knows? But
always looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.